All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something, well, let's just say, a bit delicate, a bit sensitive, of families' finances and their debt.
Yeah.
And this is inspired by an article that we came across. And I don't know about you, but just reading it, I was like, wow, this is going deeper than just like...
It's not just numbers, is it?
Yeah, it's not just the money. It's about all the other stuff, all the emotions and the ties that bind and all that kind of stuff. And
absolutely.
So yeah, get ready for some real financial food for thought.
Yeah.
Because this is not your typical money problem story.
Yeah.
I mean, really gets into some
deeper issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with like the background a little bit?
Yeah.
Like how did this family even get to this point?
Well, the article paints a picture of a family who, from the outside looking in, they look pretty well off.
Like living the good life.
Yeah, they've got nice homes. They, enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle.
Country club memberships.
Exactly. But behind closed doors, things are a lot different, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's a very different picture. And I think the father's quote in the article really sums it up, where he says, every month I struggle to repay loans. Our family is seen as wealthy, but behind closed doors, we are drowning in debt.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty powerful imagery there. Drowning in debt.
It's heavy, isn't it?
And it is heavy. And it does make you wonder, right? Like, how common is this? Like, are there a lot of families out there that are...
I think it's more common than we realize.
Yeah.
There's this pressure, I think, particularly in today's society, to present this image of success. And that often involves, keeping up with the Joneses, as they say.
Yeah.
Material possessions, that kind of thing. And it's easy to get caught up in that cycle of, prioritizing that immediate gratification, that sense of, we're doing well, and not really thinking about the long-term financial consequences.
And it's almost like it becomes this like vicious cycle, right? Where you're trying to maintain this image, so you keep spending to keep up the image.
Exactly.
But then the spending is what's putting you further in the hole. So
Slippery slope.
Yeah. And, we're talking about, keeping up with the Joneses and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I mean, how much of this do you think is also just like not being financially literate, like not really understanding
absolutely
how to manage money?
Financial literacy is crucial, and I think, unfortunately, it's something that's not really emphasized enough in our education system.
Right.
And so a lot of people they're not equipped with the tools and the knowledge to manage their money effectively.
Right, to make those smart decisions to budget too.
Yeah, and so it's very easy to fall into those traps, particularly when you're, bombarded with advertising and messages of consumerism all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we often talk about like emotional intelligence and all that kind of stuff, but
yeah,
I think financial intelligence is like right up there.
Absolutely.
With it, in terms of like really important life skills. Yeah, so anyway, so this family, they're in this situation, right? They're struggling, they're drowning in debt. And then there's this really interesting twist that the article brings up, which is that the father reaches out to his son for help.
Yeah.
And the son is someone who's, been responsible with their money, build a stable financial life.
Yeah, build a good career.
Yeah. And the father is basically asking him to help shoulder this family debt.
Yeah, essentially to bail them out.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, that's a really tricky situation, right? Like,
it's incredibly complex.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, is there a moral obligation for children to...
It's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, to help their parents out in that situation.
Yeah, it's where those lines get really blurred, I think.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you have this sense of family duty. You want to support your loved ones. You don't want to see them struggle.
Especially your parents.
Exactly. The people who raised you, who've made sacrifices for you throughout your life. But then on the other hand, you've got this question of personal responsibility.
Right.
If someone's made choices that have led to financial difficulty, is it fair to expect others to...
Yeah, to clean up the mess.
To bear the consequences of those choices.
Yeah.
And I think it's even more complicated in this situation because you've got this generational aspect to it as well.
Right.
You've got the father who, perhaps comes from a generation where, family duty and obligation were very strongly emphasized.
I think you take care of your own no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got the son who's, grown up in a different time where... individual achievement and, taking responsibility for your own actions is more of the prevailing ethos.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the article really highlights how this plays out, right? Like the son pushes back. He's like, I've worked hard. I've been responsible.
He's got a point.
It's not fair for me to have to bail you out for choices that you made.
Yeah, and I think there's also this underlying concern that, by constantly bailing someone out, you're not really helping them in the long run.
You're enabling them.
You're enabling them, exactly.
Yeah.
You're not teaching them to be accountable for their own actions.
And so it's a really delicate balance, isn't it?
It is.
Between, offering support and enabling bad habits.
It's tough. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, the whole concept of tough love, right?
Yes.
Sometimes love is saying no, right? It's about setting boundaries. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, but it can be the most beneficial in the long run.
Because it forces people to confront their own behaviors and to make changes.
Yeah, and in the article, the son even goes as far as to criticize his parents for their lack of foresight. They're maybe overindulgence, and it's harsh, but it's also kind of
there's a realness to it.
Yeah, there's a realness, there's a truth to it that's well, yeah, maybe you guys did make some not so great choices along the way. And I think that's where it's important to remember that money is often a reflection of our values.
Oh, yeah.
And so these different approaches to finances that we're seeing between the father and the son, they really speak to a deeper clash of values.
That's interesting, and it makes you wonder, right? How much of this is just, personality differences, and how much of it is
I think it's a combination of factors, isn't it?
Yeah, societal influences, or even
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we can't ignore the broader economic context here.
Yeah.
We've got rising debt levels, stagnant wages, the cost of living is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And all of that creates this pressure cooker environment where people are struggling to make ends meet. And I think that can exacerbate these generational divides that we're talking about.
Right, because it's almost like the older generation maybe had it easier in some ways.
Yeah, they may have had more opportunities to build wealth.
Yeah, they could buy a house on a single income.
Exactly.
College was affordable.
Yeah, whereas younger generations are facing a completely different set of challenges.
Yeah, crippling student loan debt.
Exactly.
Just the gig economy and not having that same...
That stability.
Yeah, stability. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison.
And I think that can lead to a lack of understanding and empathy between generations.
Right. It's well, you don't understand what I'm going through.
Exactly.
You had it so easy, and it's well, yeah.
But it's a different world now.
Yeah, it's a different world. And so... Anyway, so we've got this family. They're clashing over these values. They're clashing over, responsibility and finances. And then the article throws this curveball, which is that the father...
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, proposes selling all the family homes.
Yeah, to wipe the slate clean.
As a way to get out of debt.
A drastic solution.
It is drastic. And I was surprised to read that the son actually agrees to this.
I think it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah, what do you think that says about his mindset?
I think on some level he recognizes the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
They're at a point where these half measures, these kind of, Band-Aid solutions are not going to cut it.
Yeah, they need a major intervention.
They need a complete reset.
And maybe he's also realizing that, this is tough love in action.
Yeah, this is the consequence of the choices that have been made.
Yeah, you've got to hit rock bottom sometimes to really turn things around.
And sometimes that rock bottom is a financial reset.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call.
It is, and it's painful, but it can be necessary.
Yeah, and, the son makes this comment in the article about, people needing to learn to live within their means. It's that's such a simple concept, but it's so profound at the same time.
It's the foundation of financial stability, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have lost sight of that.
Particularly in today's, consumer-driven society where, we're constantly bombarded with messages to buy more, spend more, have more.
Yeah, and it's so easy to get caught up in that.
And to lose sight of what truly matters.
And so this idea of selling everything and starting over, it's almost like a symbolic gesture of
Yeah, stripping away the excess.
Yeah, stripping away the excess, getting back to basics.
Focusing on what's truly important.
Yeah, and I think there's a really powerful message in that for all of us.
Absolutely.
Regardless of our financial situation.
It's a reminder to take stock of our own lives.
Yeah.
To examine our values and our priorities.
Yeah, and maybe to make some adjustments.
Yeah, and to ensure that, we're living in a way that's sustainable and that's aligned with our values.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that this whole situation, it's obviously very specific to this family.
Yeah, it's a unique story.
but it also feels so universal at the same time.
It touches on those core human experiences.
Yeah, like who hasn't had money issues with family or, disagreements about finances or...
Absolutely. It's something that I think most people can relate to on some level.
Yeah, and so I think that's why this story is so compelling, because it's a reminder that, these issues, they're not just about the numbers. They're about relationships. They're about values.
Yeah, they're about how we interact with each other.
Yeah, and about how we make those tough choices.
And I think that's a valuable takeaway for all of us.
Yeah, so I guess the question is for our listeners out there, does this resonate with you?
Yeah, have you experienced similar situations?
Yeah, have you had to navigate these tricky financial dynamics within your own families?
And how have you approached it?
Yeah, because it's not easy.
It's challenging.
There's no easy answers.
No, and I think that's why it's so important to have these conversations.
Yeah, to be open and honest with each other.
Yeah, and to try to understand each other's perspectives.
Yeah, even if you disagree.
Even if you disagree, because at the end of the day, family is family.
Yeah, and you want to be able to support each other.
But you also want to be able to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that's the real challenge, isn't it?
It is.
Finding that balance.
And finding that balance between support and enabling.
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Where does responsibility to help end an enabling begin?
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a clear-cut answer.
I don't think there is.
But it's something that we all need to grapple with.
Absolutely.
And to think about.
Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Something to chew on.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that was quite a deep dive.
Yeah, it was.
Into family finances and all the complexities that come with it.
Yeah, the human side of debt.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for sharing your insights and expertise on this.
My pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Likewise.
And for our listeners out there, if this episode resonated with you, or if you have your own stories or thoughts to share, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Join the conversation.
Yeah, leave us a comment or send us an email. Let's keep this conversation going.
Let's keep talking about it.
All right, until next time.
Take care.
Bye.